We're looking at different artists and how they do water in ink. You can see up here, these are all the different examples I'm going to draw from today. I put these in the order of least to most tumultuous for the water. I'm super excited for this one. I love ink, of course. And drawing water in ink, I think it's going to be like the drapery, where once you get the kind of idea in your head of how to do it, it's actually quite simple. But getting the idea in your head is a little bit of a is the tricky part. And I think more and more I think about it, a lot of things in art are like that. It's not so much that it's difficult to draw, it's that it's difficult to wrap your head around how to draw it. And that's the whole struggle. Once you can understand it conceptually, actually doing the drawing is pretty straightforward. That's what I expect. We'll see. Maybe it'll be super difficult. This first reference is from Al Williamson. I'm specifically looking at underneath the ship where the transition happens between the light and the dark. I like the shapes of the shadows here. It's a lot of capturing where is dark, where is light. In this particular picture, so also a thing that I've noticed in preparing some of this is I think a lot of times the water is used compositionally, because I think you can fudge the water and most people probably won't notice. I wouldn't have noticed if I wasn't looking at these more carefully, but like in this one, we have the dark water on the right and on the left, and then the ship. And at first I thought that dark patch on the right side was because it was reflecting the shadowed side of the ship. But then the light side of the ship and the sail is dark over here in the water. And then there's this light patch in the middle. And it doesn't, unless I'm missing something, and maybe the dark sail is being cast this way. But I wonder if that was used compositionally to draw the eye around the page. So, how is he breaking this down? There's the little white. I'm not going to do this line for line necessarily, but I'm going to try to keep the spirit of it. There's the white kind of strip where the foam comes up, or where the wave hits the bottom of the ship. That's an important part of water. And it looks like it's actually a little bit spikier on top and less so on the bottom. More rounded on the bottom. It's almost like a lot of little mountains, right? Like little peaks, amplitudes. And I think a lot of it is kind of like with some kinds of fabric drapery, how the black cuts into the white and how the white cuts into the black. Kind of a give and take. I guess it's just a simple gradient. More of a texture, really, than anything. Might help if I put in this ship a little bit, too. Just a little hint of it. I learned long ago there's no rhyme or reason to water, and just go with the flow. I see. Yeah, I'm wondering, Ursa, if there's a lot in common between water and drapery. I mean, because fabric is almost, it's almost a liquid, right? It can behave in a kind of a liquidy way. I feel like brush is a good tool for water. Brush is kind of a liquidy kind of a tool. And Crochet, you sent me a PDF of a book called something like How to Paint Water in Watercolor. I'm thinking of trying to get a hold of the physical copy. Maybe do a stream looking at that book at some point. The kind of companion to this. And then think about how to combine the ink techniques with the watercolor techniques. They do have the wave and flow vibes to them, so maybe just drapes tend to go down and water goes from side to side. Yeah, I'm thinking more of like on clothes. Like we get these kind of waveforms coming up. And I don't know, this kind of, maybe it's just the half lock, but this kind of a thing makes me think about this. And there's like the pattern with drapes, with drawing drapery. You kind of do like this. And so you're leaving the white shape and the black shape. Positive versus negative shapes. I think another thing to look at is reflections, shadows. I think that relates to this as well. We have the shadowed area, the light area, and what happens at the intersection of the two. This is Terry Moore from Strangers in Paradise. This one interests me for a few reasons. Oh, yeah, I should mark down texture. This one is big on texture. Also, being used as a compositional element. So it's just this sea of texture, this kind of dark gray. And then the figure is sort of a reverse silhouette against it. Makes it really pop. Those clouds, yeah, I was thinking about those clouds as well. I was thinking if I do a cloud study, that might be... might need to reuse this image. Also notice the lightning pointing right to the figure. Kind of come from the top left, read the text, come down through the clouds to the right, and then that lightning shoots us back right at our figure there. And that figure really pops against this texture. I want to know how long it took to do this water. Because it looks like you could do it in like 15 minutes. Maybe 10 minutes. But I wonder if there was a lot of underdrawing. Just kind of a little bit of a gradient. Kind of in the middle. I think the left edge and the right edge has a sort of... Yeah, it looks like there's a sort of triangle coming in from the sides. Also pointing at the figure. It's a little bit lighter in the middle and a little darker on the side, kind of a vignette. This one is more about the white shapes than the black shapes, I feel. I think in the Al Williamson example, it was more about the black on white. And in this one, I think the white shapes are more prevalent. Maybe I should draw a few of them just to get myself started. Again, like drapery, I think it'd be easy to get lost in the minutia and lose out on the big picture. Not seeing the ocean for the trees. It's more about a feeling. His white shapes are actually a little bit longer. What are my opinions on sketching in pencil first and applying ink later? I do it a lot. I like it. I started to do it with this, but I think after trying to draw it in pencil and thinking about inking it, I think that this is the kind of thing where the feeling of it is more important than the structure. I think in a lot of these examples, the structure will be more important. I think especially maybe the next example, the Charles Burns one. And so probably do more penciling first on those. This one isn't so much about the structure as it is about making a texture and a vibe. I think that the mood here. So, but yeah, I usually will pencil and then ink. So this one is definitely textured. Texture composition. All right, I'm gonna move on to the next one. I think I got basically the feeling of it. I don't think my shapes are the same, but I think something that's this kind of gestural, copying the shapes exactly is not a good way. I think the feel, yeah, and his are a lot smoother than mine. I went and got a little jagged. Maybe I'm thinking about the top of the crest here from Al Williamson. Maybe I've just had too much coffee. Charles Burns. This is from Charles Burns's Black Hole. This one, there's really undulating going on. And a lot of structure. The water in this has a kind of ominous feel, which fits the story. And if I feel like there's some foreboding. Although Burns's art in general has a kind of ominous feel to it. It's the high contrast. And it's almost like woodcutty too, which speaks to me, of course. So this one I think is a lot about finding the shapes of the crests and getting maybe a rhythm. Rhythm is an important word to write down. Great sense of perspective in this, yeah. This one, if we were studying perspective and looking at this, it would be size, like the foreground waves kind of diminishing into the background waves. Really is really effective, huh? He has these kind of a little bit of closure on his shapes here. A lot of these shapes kind of almost connect up to the next one. There's a white space in between. And Burns is such a identifiable style. I feel like Burns is a woodcutter at heart. His feathering is absolutely woodcut mark. Few more of these shapes in, and I do want to get that perspective in too. That was a good eye on that crochet. Starts to get a little bit smaller. That feathered line starts to go away as we get further back. It just becomes kind of more like the Al Williamson looking marks. So I consulted the Inkronomicon, this book here, Rendering and Pen and Ink by Arthur L. Guptill, and I was shocked that there was not a section on water. I looked at the index and looked for water, and it was not there. There's a lot on drawing architecture, not so much on water. Like he's drawing a bigger scene, and the water is just kind of happens to be there. In the examples in this book, the water is often just this white shape with a little bit of horizontal hatching. So underneath, there's a bridge here, and underneath the bridge, you can see the shadow. And a little bit along the coast here, where either the water gets shallow or maybe it's reflecting the rocks. But I feel like the water in all of these is more of compositional, used compositionally. There's some water here, but there's not a lot of rendering going on. There's not a lot of texture being used. You can see here, kind of these horizontal squiggly lines. It looks like all of this was drawn in, with great consideration to structure. And then the water is just kind of, the reflections are more important than the texture of the water. And I wonder if that is a more classic thing, because I was looking at some other examples. I was looking at Da Vinci's notebooks for examples of drawing water, and it's even more dashed off than this. It looks really just done really quickly. So yeah, I think the white and using the water as a compositional point is probably the most important thing here. This one had a little bit more. This was the most sort of like fully considered example. But even this, it's just, kind of wavy horizontal lines, fairly uniform in most places. And then where the reflection of the shore is just some verticals. And I remember learning in the past when you're doing reflections in water, like keeping them vertical, and maybe you can have them broken a little bit, but more or less vertical is the way to do it for reflections. But in this whole book, this is the only real example that I found in my flipping through that had any decent things. So I'm very surprised that the Inkronomicon does not have more on water, but it has more on everything else. I was also looking at Albrecht Durer book here, which these are woodcuts and or wood engravings. And again, his water is pretty much like, in Guptil. Like, so you can see there's a ship there. So this is the sea, but it's mostly just white. And then some horizontal lines when it gets closer to the shore. Not a lot. More back here. Not a lot of not a lot of attention paid to it, probably because there's so much else important happening. But some water down here too, but it's just these white shapes. So that's interesting. And yeah, here again, more or less horizontal lines close to the shore, but everything over here is white. This is another woodcut example, and there's some good water at the beginning of this. Here, this wave, and actually this. So I thought this was water at first, but this is his sail. You can see the water behind, but he's got this good the kind of undulations. There's kind of a form going this way, and then a form going that way, and going this way. Get this this beautiful wave in the foreground here. You can see here, using it compositionally to kind of vignette or frame the action. And then we have the gray water here and here, but then there's this big black wave where the boat is, the high contrast part here. Very nicely done compositionally. It's like marks pointing right at our focal point. I also found, I got this book by P. Craig Russell. I was really interested in this. I didn't use it today as an example because he's using gray. He's using some screen tone, I think. So this was done in 3 values, 4 if you count the figure here. But I just love the shapes that he used for the water there. Very interesting. Usually when I think about water, I think about more of these kinds of shapes. Maybe more triangles, or more triangles, or maybe more rounded shapes. But these are like squares and rectangles. It's an interesting take on water. I'm not sure. I can't remember seeing water done in squares and rectangles before. So I like that. This is Jim Woodring. Man, talk about ink. Jim Woodring. I love his inks. His inks remind me a lot of Charles Burns's, except they have they're more maybe dynamic. Charles Burns is his ink work, like I said, is very ominous. I guess Woodring's work is pretty ominous too, but he has a sort of bouncy, there's a bouncy nature to his line. I think Burns doesn't have. Burns is maybe more solid, but there's a lot of similarities. You can see the feathering on these waves here. Jim Woodring is one of my favorites. I've stolen so much of how he puts down marks in my work. Not that you would ever notice, because it's a poor imitation. Also, he's using composition here quite well. So we see Frank, the character there. In the previous few panels, Frank is walking on the beach, and he hears a sound, and it's from one of those seashells where you put it to your ear, and you can hear the ocean. So he picks it up and puts it to his ear, and this tongue comes out of it and licks him, and it freaks him out. So he grabs this shovel, and he's going in and smashing these things in the sea. All the comics are wordless. They're absurd, kind of hallucinogenic. That's why they speak to me. But you can see he's using composition to kind of draw us to those things by leaving out that big white shape in the middle of all this kind of texture, all these feathered lines. So I'm going to ignore those shapes because I'm just focusing on his waveforms. And I like how when it washes up here, the black kind of goes away and we just get this, just turns into line as the wave or the foam kind of dissipates. Yes, great art to steal, exactly. And that's the study as well, right? I'm trying to steal from all of these artists and take all these different ingredients, mix them together, and filter them through my own work and make it something different. But that's what every artist does, and that's what art is. That's nice too. We're in we have a lineage. There's a succession going back to I guess to the cave paintings. I don't know, but it's something I'm very interested in is different artists' lineage going back. For regular still, semi-still water, horizontal lines are important. Figuring that out, or horizontish. This isn't so hard. Just some squibbly lines like that. And then just this feathered line here. Oh, and he's a little bit thicker on this side. So I watched a documentary about Jim Woodring not long ago. I think it was called The Illumination of Jim Woodring. Interesting, very interesting creator. But I was very glad to see that. I mean, I'm not in a Schadenfreude. I was glad to see that he struggles through a lot of his pieces. He draws and erases and draws and erases and draws and erases. And I think, man, if somebody at his level is experiencing that, well, it made me feel better. Just goes through and does this. And actually, these ones then... Yeah, so that's this side. One's kind of... As the water gets darker, as it gets deeper, I suppose. All right, this is Osamu Tezuka. So the waves are getting a little bit more tumult. And so we looked at a lot of triangle shapes, and we were looking at that P. Craig Russell example with the squares and rectangles. Tezuka is using more ovals, more rounded shapes, and getting this beautiful flow. So these undulations, kind of all about, a lot of this is just about design. It's not even necessarily a direct translation of what it is. You see texture, composition, rhythm, you get mood and design. Yeah, almost snake-like shapes, right? Pressed up here, there's the white border and cut in with these shapes. Almost like three ovals stuck together here, and then some smaller working in. Oh, and the angle. Okay, the axis of the ovals, even though they're next to each other, changes. So this one, the long axis is that way, and this one, the long axis is that way, and that gives more of that undulating feel. The original ink drawing looks amazing, very difficult to copy. It's a bit similar to Jack Kirby. Yeah, there's that. That's right. There's some of the kind of Kirby spots, the Kirby dots rather, or Kirby crackle. And yeah, the original difficult to copy. With all of these, I think copying these exactly is not so important. I think the thing is copying the feel of them and the kind of maybe the recipe for how to make these. Maybe recipe is a good way to think of it. Each of these artists has their kind of ingredients, and then once you've got your ingredients and you kind of understand it, it's just a matter of putting it down in an appealing way. At least that's what it looks like to me. Yeah, it's interesting using ink for water. I mean, all of these are hard edges. That's one thing about woodcut and about ink. And the reason that I like actually painting my woodcuts and my ink work with watercolor is that contrast. Watercolor is very soft and ink and woodcut is very hard. Problem to solve, I suppose, in drawing water with ink is how to draw an almost edgeless substance in something that only has hard edges. And so, you know, here it's feathering that's doing the solving of it. Here and here it's more of a texture. I guess with this Tezuka one, it's using these softer shapes. This direction of the axis. I'm glad I noticed that. It's an interesting thing. Adds that movement. Like, you often think, like, I'm using exactly the same constituent parts. Why does mine not look as good? These little subtle things. Sort of soft movement it creates. Just by changing the axis a little bit. He's got these areas of open white and then groupings of these ovals. Like the rhythm that creates. I think so far from all the waters looked at so far, Tezuka's is the most interesting to me. Maybe because it's the furthest away from how I would naturally approach this. I think I'm much more of the Al Williamson way of thinking, probably because I grew up with American comics. But this is really beautiful water. Got so much character to it. Oh, you know what I'm noticing? There's a spot here. Let's see if I can incorporate it. He's got this kind of trailing off bit. Right on the right-hand side, there's rocks in the bottom right corner, and if you follow the rocks up the right edge of the picture, then we get to that white shape that cuts across the left to the boat. And I guess that's the wake of the boat. And I just noticed that now. And that's a nice nice composition as well. A nice compositional piece. Also in the sky, it looks like he has maybe birds or clouds. Must be clouds. The shapes kind of, they're not the same, but they're similar to the shapes of the water. And it has a sort of a rhythmic flow to it as well. And then it frames the figures in the boat very nicely at the top middle. Very beautiful. It undulates. Yeah, the whole thing undulates. Put that word down here. I feel like I've said that word more in this stream than I have in however many years I've been streaming. Undulation. Water. I've just thought of my next redeem in Ursa's stream. So Ursa is going to make me a gherkin lurkin in a jerkin. I might have to request an undulating ungulate. Anyway, moving on. This is Mark Schultz. And he does this thing that I'm trying to figure out how he does it. He gets this kind of blur. Uh-oh, it changed my reference. He gets this blur. I don't know how well you can see it on screen, but on the legs of the female figure, those marks coming down diagonally, it looks like he put a blur filter on, and some of this water around them as well. But his stuff, I think, is all traditional techniques. And then that waterfall in the back left, it looks like he took one of these and maybe like split the nib and get this kind of double line. I don't know. I've done a lot of studies of his work on my own in the past few months. I need to get to the bottom of some of his techniques. There's a lot in common with Tezuka, I guess, in some of these shapes. He does some feathering on them. I guess, oh, okay, this is interesting. Got the white foam. And then as his shapes kind of get close to where the action is, they start to feather out. So the stuff more in the foreground is more maybe swirling, sloshing, and then it starts to turn into this action. Feathering starts to happen. Fabulous cross contouring. Yeah. Fabulous everything. It's mirrored in his jacket, but his pants are all about drapery folds. Yeah, he has the big folds in the pants. I think probably, I don't know if that's to make a big dark shape there, or maybe also to communicate the texture of the fabric. But yeah, he's got it in the jacket, and that's compositional too, I think, right? Pulling us in. I noticed earlier, it's not necessarily germane to what I'm doing here, but he has the male figure, the hat is white, and then the water that's coming down, the splash right behind him is also white, and it's framing the head, and my instinct would be to make that water black or make the hat black to get some contrast here. But he manages just with his line weight and maybe the application of the line to give us contrast in that way instead of with value. And it's really interesting. Like that, the hat really pops against that water in the top right, and it's only because the difference in line. It's very impressive. But we're not looking there. We're looking at the bottom. Where am I supposed to look? Might be that he used a gray instead. Like, yeah, I was trying to figure out if he uses gray at all in any of this, because it looks gray. Okay, that's a good thought. A lot of it looks gray, but I think, like in that waterfall in the back left, I think if you zoom in and look closely enough, it is a split line. Let me see if we can look closer. Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was gray, but it looks like it might be some dry brush. Now that I look more closely. He's got this I don't know. Maybe it's all dry brush. Like here. I need to figure out how he gets these marks. Stuff here. Like, I don't know. To me, there's a lot of his work that he must have had. He must have modified his drawing tools for some of these marks. Yeah. Maybe he watered down the black. The conduits behind him are fabulous and goes into white, not into shadow. Very cool. Oh, you mean the this part here? Look at that. Oh man, it's too good. It's too good. It really is Plum's ink. I am so taken with Schultz's ink work. Looks like he took a gray, then went back over the black. It does kind of look like that, doesn't it, Kay? It looks like he put down some gray smudge, maybe, and then inked black on top of it. It's a good thought. Gotta have to think more about that. Hold on. Hold on. Put this back up again. Marks. Could it possibly be just dry brush? I don't know. Yeah, because it looks gray here. Definitely looks gray. This paper has a little bit of a tooth to it. But you're right here. I think you like it. It looks like he put down some gray and then went on top of it with lines. Ah. man. Isn't the waterfall a dry, flat brush? Yeah, it might be. There's some other examples in his books. I don't have any here, where he's drawing these single lines that look like he split his brush. Like I know there's a technique. Did it to one of my brushes. You take a old brush and you put it, frisk it on it, get it dried out, then you can get a nice technique. So I'm never sure if he's using just dry brush or if he's using something like this, split brush. Maybe he uses both. Wait, how am I supposed to do this? Kind of like that. And I might be trying to approximate his stuff with the wrong tools, but that's okay too. Like I said before, it's about the feeling, not copying verbatim. Interesting here. You even get change in direction. The hatching, or of the feathering rather. This adds a little bit to the chaos, maybe? Or just a little visual interest, a la Guptill. And so down away from the action, like I said, it's hard edge, just flowy blobs. It turns into feathered stuff. That transition quite a bit. He's using every opportunity to reinforce the action. Interesting thought, like how many different ways can I use what's in the composition to reinforce what I'm trying to communicate without it being distracting? It's like I probably wouldn't have noticed that change from these hard-edged blobs in the foreground to these feathered blobs closer up here if I wasn't really looking closely. But I definitely noticed subconsciously the feeling that it creates. Yeah, it gives it a real blur technique, this traditional kind of ink mark like that, but then somehow got a vibration to it. His lines here, his white lines are smaller. I made them too big. Fit these together more like puzzle pieces. The above water splashes near the guy's knee are either super fine ink or something else. Yeah, that's got to be. I mean, that's more dry brush, right? Yeah, here it looks like there's two tones. It looks like there's a black and a gray. Might be some gray laid down. Got to think about that. That's what you think? Okay. Is it just like the line starts off black and then the paint gets less, turns more gray, or was it a separate mix? Because this looks grayer than that. Well, this is not a Mark Schultz artist study. This has been the whole stream deconstructing Schultz. I got a few more artists to look at. Better move on. Apologies to Mark Schultz on this, whatever this is supposed to be. This is not this is not what he drew, but I've learned quite a lot from fumbling through it, so that's the important part. Next one is Christophe Chabouté. This is from Moby Dick. And actually, I'm not going to draw this one because we're running low on time. And there's not too much to draw. Just the thing that I noticed here that interested me in particular was the Dutch angle to get the kind of unstable nature of it. It's very simple, totally black with a few white shapes cut in, but the angle of the shapes and then the movement of the spray as a compositional element, I think works quite well in this. This is Becky Cloonan. Oh man. I think this is the only one that I don't have the book for. I think this is a print. I think this is a print for sale. I saw this up on Instagram, and I think this was also one of the early reasons for doing this stream. I'm just gonna have to pick. So there's so many different directions going on here. This is tumultuous, to be sure. Pick one of these waves. Just try to draw that. Otherwise, you'll see me slowly unravel. Try to keep this all straight. Movement is this way. So I was looking at the more classical examples, or at least from examples from the maybe early 1900s and before. The rendering and pen and ink examples, Albrecht Durer, and like I said, I looked at some Da Vinci, whose water was not that impressive. I'm wondering if water is just a really hard thing to work out, and we're the, as with all art, we're the beneficiary of hundreds and thousands of years of workshopping how to do things. And I wonder when it was that somebody figured out how to draw water like this. When was the first time somebody got it to this level? What century was it? Was it the 20th century? Could it have taken that long? People to work that out? I'm sure there's earlier examples. Water doesn't have to be impressive, but it should be believable. Yeah, I agree, Crochet. Well, I think if it's believable, it's impressive. But I think it also should serve... It should serve the composition, or serve the narrative, right? So for a lot of cases, like those Guptill examples earlier, the drawings were about the architecture. And they just happened to be next to some water. But the water was more of a supporting character. This piece, the water is the main character. And so the water gets all the attention. I think in the Tezuka example, the water is also extremely important. And so it's very considered. I think the Charles Burns one too. I think there's figures in those panels, but I think the mood that the water creates is the important part on that page. When I was a tattoo apprentice, I did a lot of drawing the Japanese tattoo style water as well, which is its own kind of icon. Like the different ways of having a gradation. But here we have the feathering, but then there's also some spots where the big shape turns into a medium-sized shape. Some directionality. It turns into a smaller shape. Which is the same, basically the same idea as the feathering, just variation of it. The axes of all of these marks, since this is a wave that's moving, unlike the Tezuka one, where the water was going in kind of in a more undulating way, this is a violent wave, and so all the energy is going this direction. So it looks like all of the axes of these shapes are at that angle. It's interesting how some of these marks are flat on the bottom and some have the feathering. I like the variation. Just the fact of that adds a lot of energy to it too. The contrast. Yes, I would... The initial thinking would be throw feathering on everything because it makes it more dynamic. But by not throwing feathering on everything, by leaving some of it unfeathered, it actually makes it more dynamic by creating that contrast, I think. That's an interesting thing to notice. So this one is made up of ovals that are either broken by feathering or are solid. I guess just figuring out the right combination of those parts. Actually saying it makes it sound really simple, doesn't it? And there's even more subdividing of these waves that I'm not even getting. I guess probably you put in that and then find secondary. Missed out on those. I'm thinking about the texture and lost some of that structure. These secondary forms, white shapes that kind of go through, find each other. Oh man. This next one is R. Crumb. This is from the illustrated Book of Genesis. So R. Crumb went through and did the entire Book of Genesis from the Bible as a comic. This is from the Great Flood. So I'm gonna pretend that the rain is not on top of these just for simplification, because this is a water study and rain's not water. Drawing hard rain in front of stuff is hard. Yeah, I wonder for this rain if he went in and drew his picture without the rain and then drew black lines and then took like white out and cut in alongside the edge of the black line, or if he very carefully and meticulously drew around it. I would imagine he used some kind of a white media, but I'd be wrong on that. So these waves are more like the Charles Burns ones in that they're more structural. At least that's what I'm seeing so far. He's definitely got a lit side and a shadow side. So thinking about waves and water as a solid or more solid object. Cut in a little bit of white into these. And again, this is the positive versus the negative shapes. Getting the points of transition between the shadow and the light, or the dark and the light side. That, I think that's the key to drawing water, maybe, is working out those transition points. Maybe everything else is rudimentary. So finding a way to sneak in white behind the black to make it still read. Get this shape here. And then this other wave right behind it. The black overlaps just enough so that we can see the white of the crest. But then when it gets down here where it's in front of the black part of the wave in front of it, it switches back to white. Get that pattern, but becomes readable again. Here it becomes white. It's like crashing movement. Depending on the paper you use, you could mask the whites at least where they switch. Yeah, you could do that too, Crochet. That's a good point. Throw in some masking fluid or some frisket. So right under the crests, black, and then comes down to the light where it's not being in the cast shadow of the top of the wave. Kind of like mountains. So kind of like the yeah, a lot of similarities with the Burns, even though it doesn't look the same. I think that the underlying thinking is probably the same with these. Oh boy. This is by Taiwanese artist, a local Taiwanese artist. I don't know the tones, so apologies Wednesday if you know this artist and and my tones are off. I only have the romanized pinyin Lung-chieh. We'll say Li Lao Shi. I'm looking at this area around here. The movement of the water and the kind of how it turns into mist. This water's like 5 styles put together. It is, isn't it? Yeah, that's why this is the final water. Of course, I'm a sucker for the stippling. Looks like there's some dry brush here too. Like I said, it's a local comic by a Taiwanese artist. This is the comic. I haven't read it yet. It's hard to read. It's in Mandarin. It's fabulous water. It really is. Chaos water could be an energy drink. Yeah, this is a few styles. This stippling is what caught my eye. I'm surprised we haven't seen more stippling in this study. Makes a lot of sense for kind of a foamy. All right, let's see. So, positive versus negative shapes. So that was cutting in of the black and the white. Thinking about shape design in that way. Also design. Like cutting in here especially, I think. Really botched that Schultz, huh? Texture. The texture was especially in Terry Moore. I think the Tezuka has some interesting texture that comes out from there as well. These two, for sure. Crumb always has texture in his work. Composition. The rhythm. Rhythm in the mood. The Charles Burns was big with the rhythm in the mood. Woodring's work always has a kind of weird mood to it, too. A lot of that in these. A lot of dynamism. Undulation. That was the word of the day. Undulation. So this was exciting. Turns out there's more than one way to render water in ink.